So I do a similar role to Kai. I work with businesses around the world on what you can do with APIs for your business. And I love doing the strategy conversation. That's the fun one. Monetization is the frustrating one. I talk about monetization a lot. I've written a paper on monetization. When I submitted, I think, 10 different abstracts for the conference, they picked this one. And so I'll tell you why I'm frustrated with it in a second. But this is me. I'm the digital transformation and API business strategist. Whatever name I come up with varies from year to year. Basically, I go out and I talk to businesses about what you're doing with APIs. I learn from you, and I share experiences of what I've learned from others. And so I speak at conferences. I do one-on-one workshops. And when I'm not doing any of that kind of thing, I'm writing about it. So I write a lot, and these are the topic areas that I've written about. The numbers are the number of articles that I've written in each one of those areas. And today we're going to talk about 2 or 3 from that one, which cover monetization. At the end of the deck, which you will get, I have 140 links to the 140 articles that I've written, and so you can take that home, and if you're having trouble sleeping, this would be a very good cure for that. So we're going to talk about monetization. We'll start with the definition, because as I said, it's not what you think it means. I wrote one of the blogs I wrote, I stole from The Princess Bride. Anybody a Princess Bride fan? No? Yeah. I do not believe that word means what you think it means, right? So that's monetization to me. We'll talk about the value and trying to chase the value and how the money flows. And then I've got the paper that I wrote, which is linked to as well, has 20-something different models. I didn't count how many there are there. With definition of each model, an example of each model, a company that's doing each one of the models. So we're going to zip through that section because I only have 20 minutes total. So we'll fly through that. And then just some getting started thoughts. John Musser, if you don't know John, he's one of the founding fathers of the API world and founder of Programmable Web, as well as many other things. This is based on his initial work. All right, so let's start with the definition. API monetization is defined as charging the API consumer to use your APIs. Do you like that definition? Who likes that definition? I saw a couple of hands go up. This is wrong. This is wrong. And this is my frustration. And so I'll do this session, and at the end of this session, I'll make such a good argument, you'll all believe me, that it's not just about charging for your APIs. It's much more than that. And then at the end of the session, somebody's going to ask to me, but how do I charge for my APIs? And that's what's so frustrating about this, right? So what is the definition? It's driving revenue through the use of APIs. And this is much more than charging for APIs. Charging is one model, maybe a few models that fit into that category. But it's much more than that. And so the blog that I referenced is what does it really mean? And we have the white paper that has all the definitions. So most people who speak about monetization, and by the way, this is not just me, I'm IBM, from IBM. This is not just IBM's statement. Gartner talks about this, Forrester talks about this. You name any vendor, they're all saying it's more than just charging for APIs, okay? So there are 4 higher level categories that monetization covers. Free, we can talk about free. Developer pays. This is the one everybody likes. This is the one where they pay you to use your APIs, right? So we all like that one. Why do we like that one? We like it because it's easy, right? If we charge for an API and somebody pays us, I can measure it. And then I can say, this is how much money I'm making from my APIs. And it's so simple. And I just want it to be simple, right? So if I could do that, that's great. The problem is, that's not the model that our business works on. If you think about the business that you're in, whatever business you're in, it's probably about the value that you give to somebody that you're charging for, not the number of times that they deal with you. And so the number of API calls is typically a meaningless metric as far as value. You may have 1 million API calls that are worth nothing to somebody. Or you may have one that's worth a lot of money. Right? And so why do I want to base it on the number of API calls when it's more about the value that I'm giving you, right? So we want to make the API monetization fit the business model, not the other way around. And that's what this is all about. Developer gets paid. You may pay somebody to use your APIs. They're selling your product for you. They want a commission. They want some kind of revenue sharing, right? So that'll fit in. And I think, as I forget which speaker this morning said, it was first speaker, blanking his name. No, Bill. Bill talked about indirect, right? Most of the models that you're going to see in the world are indirect. And this is a great way to make a lot of money using APIs. And so I'm going to go into these in more detail. The link to the paper is at the bottom here. All the links will be at the end as well. But I'm going to get into the variations on these four big categories in a few minutes. So this is a chart we don't need for you all. You know what an API is. We're going to move onward. So basically, we have our assets in our enterprise. We're going to expose these as APIs. There's a consumer in the middle who uses those APIs, and then they develop something like a mobile app or something like that, a partner app, that somebody is going to use. And so, as Kai just said, as many speakers will tell you here all week, you focus on the consumer, right? And then you work backward into the provider. And we have to think about, when we're thinking about monetization, the value to each one of the parties in this equation. Because this consumer needs to get value, this consumer of the API needs to get value, and you as a provider want to get value. And if you can come up with this win-win-win kind of a scenario, you have a monetization situation. If you think of things that you benefit from, but the others don't care, that's not so good, right? So we need to find a way that everybody's finding value in this. So same kind of picture here. Let's think about the three participants: the API provider, the API consumer, and the app who is the app provider, and this end-use customer. And so there's a bunch of different models that we're going to lay on top of this picture. So the first one, I call these the less interesting monetization models, is internal consumers, right? You may have people in your company that are using your APIs that do something like create a mobile app or something like that, that drives revenue in your company because people are using your mobile app to do things with you, right? That is a monetization model. It's just one of the lesser interesting ones. Similarly, you might have B2B scenarios where you provide something to another business and their employees are using what they use your API for, and so that's a less interesting one as well. I'm going to cover these too, but you know, they kind of fall into the bigger picture of thinking about these as three separate people, right? So I am a provider. I provide APIs to a third party who is providing something to someone else. And when I think about it that way, we cover all the models, right? So that's the way to think about it. And these are the more interesting ones, at least in my mind. So probably the most important chart in this whole presentation. Is the asset or valuable, or is exposing an asset just a cost of doing business? If you are creating a list of the products that you offer to the marketplace, nobody's paying you for that API, right? This is something you've got to just list your products and you make that API available. It may be a way that you make some money because somebody may take that API and create some kind of a third-party comparison app that guides people to you. But you're not going to charge for that API in any way. Who is it valuable to, the API consumer or the end user? This is something, I had this discussion with a business here in Sweden yesterday. You think about, if there is a monetization flow, who should pay who in this scenario? If this is valuable to the API consumer, they may be the one who pays you, and they're then providing value to that end consumer using your asset. Something like a credit agency, right? Where you're a credit agency, you're checking the credit on somebody who wants to borrow money from a bank. The bank is the consumer of your API. They're making a loan to an end user. So they're using the credit check API from a credit agency to do that. It's valuable to the bank to use that credit check API. It's not, and it's providing value to the end user as well, right? So that's the scenario, but the consumer, the API consumer, is the one who's getting the main value from that API. In other cases, it may flow all the way through to the end user, and they're the one who's getting value. So depending on who the value is to, that's the person who's probably going to end up with the money coming out of their pocket, right? And so that's something you want to think about. And that relates to this next question, which is, who owns the customer relationship? Many businesses are struggling with this in the API space because if you think about making an API available to a third party and you charge them for that API in some way, we'll come back to the models in a few minutes, then they have the right to own the customer relationship because they're paying you to use your service that you're providing on the back end, the credit check service. If you want to own the customer relationship, which many companies that I speak to do, then you can't charge them to use your API and expect them to pass the customer forward to you. You may pay them to use your API as a referral kind of a scenario where they do pass the API, the consumer, the end consumer to you. Hopefully that makes sense. I know I'm speaking English fast in the Swedish audience, so it's hopefully something that translated well there. So will pricing the asset cause people to be reluctant? If you've got competitors out there that are giving access to their API for free, then you may price yourself out of even being considered, right? So that's something to think about. Are they working on your behalf? I kind of covered that. Well, you should pay them. And is there some kind of a tiered structure, right? So this gets into some of the models where lower utilization may be free, and then you know either because of more functionality or because of more quantity, you may have some charges for more usage. All right, so this is the model that I've got that I'm going to whip through here now very quickly to show you all these different types. And so I'll quickly go through each of these, but you see the four main categories on the top, and then each one of these below it. And this is all in the paper. You can get it all from there, so it'll all be in horrible detail. Free. I love free. This example of free is probably the best monetization model I've ever seen. So you ever seen sign in with Facebook, log in with Facebook? You know, you go to an app, you go to a website, and it says that. So Facebook is not charging anybody to use that API that's behind that login with Facebook. So they're running servers all over the place that are handling all these requests to log in with Facebook, and it's costing Facebook a lot of money to run these servers, but yet they're not charging anybody to use that API. So why do they do that? Are they just very nice people and they want to give all this stuff away? Well, think about what their business is. If you log in with Facebook, they know what site you've logged into. You have an interest in that particular thing. They now can sell advertisers the fact that we can advertise to you because you're interested in what they want to advertise. So they can get the money on the back end from the advertisers. So they're not charging anything for the API. In fact, it's costing them a lot of money. But the monetization model is that they're making a lot of money from the advertisers that pay Facebook to put ads on your Facebook page because you're interested in the things that you're logging into, right? So you may have free APIs that make you a ton of money, like Facebook. Code on the top, you're going to see an arrow with a $sign. Which way does the money flow? Okay, so this case, somebody's paying you. These are the ones we love. These are our favorites, right? Somebody's paying us. Pay as you go. So it's a very simple model. Simple is good in API. So pay for what you use. No minimums, no tiers. We'll bill you once a month, however much you use. Go for it, right? So very simple model. We do that in IBM. Amazon does that. You use the weather API from IBM or Watson APIs from IBM. We'll send you a bill at the end of the month for how much you used, right? So that's a model that works. Freemium, I think some folks mention this a lot. You mentioned this, Gustav, right? So we'll have a free level, and then we'll have some kind of a tiered model on top of that, where we have more functionality, and we'll add more capability, and we'll charge you for that as you move forward. Tiered, similar to the freemium. Typically, this is based on the number of API calls. So as opposed to more functionality, it becomes more API calls, right? So we may have tiers, similar to the old telephone plans, where you would pay for a tier, and however much you used in that tier, you would pay for the tier amount anyway, whether you used nothing or whatever you signed up for. And then it would be a hard end to what you were allowed to do, because we'd want to upsell you to the next tier so you could pay us more. I don't like this one, but it exists. Points and unit-based. So this is complicated. Complicated is always bad, right? And so different functionality that you use is worth different numbers of points, and you buy a number of points, and it all adds up to something that you get billed for. So this is not something I recommend, but then again, Google does pretty well in their business, and they do this. So Google AdWords does this. Transaction fee. I do like this one. If you're going to do anything where the developer pays you, having something about the value of the transaction that you're doing is a good thing. And so all the payment vendors do things like there's a cost to do the transaction that's fixed and then a percentage of the actual value of the transaction, right? So that makes some sense because at least we're starting to think about the value of the transaction we're doing and not just that we're doing a number of transactions, right? So loans, payments, things like that, you want to get paid more for a larger payment than for a smaller one. All right, now the arrows switch sides. So we're going the other way. So you are paying them. So revenue share. The consumer is acting as an agent for you. They are selling your product. The example I frequently talk to customers about is if you're a bank, many functions out in the world use banks, but they're not banks. Like if I buy a car or I buy a house, real estate topic that was in here this morning. I buy a house, I need a mortgage. I buy a car, I need a car loan. So these mortgage vendors, the real estate agents or the auto dealerships can partner with banks and be representing the bank to drive loans to a particular bank. The bank is going to pay the auto dealership for recommending their loan versus a competitor's loan, right? So they're getting a revenue share of the loan for the car. Affiliate marketing. You see this one a lot, where the partner includes your content or advertisements to drive customer traffic to you. So this is one that I mentioned where you want to own the customer relationship. So you put ads on other people's sites that when they click on them, they come to you, and now you get the customer relationship, but they're getting paid because the customer started on their site and got referenced to you. The next one is referral. It's very similar to affiliate, but in this case, they only get paid if the customer actually buys something. So it's not just sending the customer to you, but they have to buy. Content acquisition. We're now into indirect. Okay, so these are the ones that you're going to see a lot more. So indirect, there's no flow of money between these two. The money's coming in from somewhere else, right? So content acquisition, this is you allow for content submission by third parties that attracts customers to you. Companies like YouTube, eBay, Twitter, you can put videos out on YouTube, you can put things for sale out on eBay, you can put things on Twitter, and that drives a lot of people to go to the sites where people are providing videos or products to be bought and things like that, which makes you money, but you have APIs that let people put their content out on your site, right? So you're not charging for the APIs in any way, but you're making money through another mechanism. Content syndication is similar. You're pushing your content out. You are a content business like Yelp or New York Times or Huffington Post, and you may have a contract with someone that allows a certain amount of views or things like that, and then again, you're trying to drive people back to use your services. Internal use, consumer facing. So you create mobile apps. You do things like Netflix does or Twitter, where you have your own APIs used by your own employees with your mobile app that people are accessing your site, and that's driving business to you and you're making money. Internal use, not consumer facing. So things that are used between lines of business in a company to share assets, maybe upsell, cross-sell between multiple lines of business in a company, again, can be a way that we get revenue that we wouldn't have gotten before. B2B customer integration. So this is larger supply chain kind of scenarios, commercial banking, where you've got a business that you're working with in a B2B sense that's like a partner. And so they use your APIs and you have a partnering relationship that drives a lot of revenue between you. And it also makes you very sticky in their enterprise that you become very easy to use as a supplier. Partner integration, early merger and acquisition. A lot of times this is government agencies, retail and shipping, where there's a lot of synergy between the different participants. And again, sharing information, sharing transactions is something that can drive a lot of extra value to everybody. Business expansion, if you want to get into new markets, again, a way of doing that. So if you think about monetization as a whole, driving new customers to your business versus charging small amounts for an API call is really where the value is. And so in the few minutes I've had here with you, the message I want to give you is use APIs to get more long-term business, get more customers, get more, more ongoing business, not just charging for APIs, because the revenue that comes from that larger context is going to be much more significant. So is that it? And the answer, of course, is no. There's a whole bunch of other things that you need to think about for monetization. Many of these things become pretty complicated, and so I'm getting the stop sign. So we'll just wrap it up here. It's very attractive to do monetization. If you don't think I'm negative on monetization. It's a frustrating topic because everybody thinks it means charging for your APIs. If you think it only means charging for your APIs, you're going to be disappointed. Your API initiative is going to end up in disappointment because you're going to find very few cases where somebody's actually going to pay you for your APIs. If you think about it as driving revenue into your company, which is certainly a harder thing to measure, you'll be much more successful. So that's what most of this thing says. There's a few more key things to think about. Don't try to get it all right at once. Think of some good examples, try it out, see what works, analyze what's not working, iterate on this, do it over and over. And then I'll leave you with my links at the end. There's 3 pages of this. I'm going to zip through them quickly. If you want to bring the other speakers up for the Q&A. The one on the top left gets you to everything I write. So I've already written 2 more articles that aren't on here yet because they haven't gotten out the door. And so if you follow that link, you'll get to everything that comes in the future as well. But there's API economy, digital business. The monetization stuff is in this column right here. Strategy and governance that Kai talked about. I have a whole column of stuff on that. Next page is architecture, technology in our product, and industry use cases. And all this stuff is publicly available to everybody. So when you get the content, go for it.
Will you put it on SlideShare?
Yeah.
Great. Tweet the link and hashtag Nordic APIs so people will find it, Gustav. And Kay, please come.